All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode. It's my daily vlog. My brain isn't working. This is 95, I think. So, today, we need to talk about pacing in Hollywood. And by that, I don't mean walking around hoping that you get the job. No. Brief spoiler alert. I am going to be talking about the first 4 episodes of X-Men 97, which is the kind of revival series on Disney Plus of the old 90s X-Men cartoon. And I'm going to be talking about the Netflix live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender series, because they both have the same problem. So, if you haven't seen them, you want to avoid all spoilers, maybe skip this vlog. I'm not going to get incredibly spoilerific or anything like that, but I am going to mention some plot points just because it's necessary to kind of bring up the points that I want to bring up. So, not going to ruin the shows for you, but if you want to go in completely blind, then maybe avoid this. So, let's talk about pacing. So, when I say pacing, specifically what I am talking about is pacing in kind of a story standpoint. And I'm just really quick looking up because I can't remember the title of the most recent X-Men. There we go. Yeah. Life Death. Okay. There's a reason why I need to know the title. So, when I'm talking about pacing, what I'm talking about is basically how quickly the story progresses. Pacing is an essential part of storytelling because if you give like too much information too quickly, the story can feel very, very rushed. And if you spread out the story too much, it can feel like the show or the movie is just dragging its feet. And for whatever reason, Hollywood writers right now have a massive issue with pacing. I've seen it over and over and over again. Avatar: The Last Airbender and X-Men 97 are just 2 really good examples because it's blatantly obvious. To start with Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you guys watched, I think I can't remember at this point, but I think I made a video talking about this. But to kind of sum it up, Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix series, is basically a retelling of the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Nickelodeon cartoon. And every time, because they've tried to adapt anime to live action quite a few times, and generally what happens is anime in particular goes on for a long time. Like an average season of anime used to be anywhere between like 20 and 30 episodes for a season, and technically they would break that up into a couple seasons. But when we would come over here, we would have that, and a full anime run can generally be anywhere from about 24 episodes up to about 50 or 60, depending on the anime. So trying to condense that into a movie format has never worked. Just look at what happened with the Full Metal Alchemist live action. So something else that they've been trying to do more recently is they will take an anime series and they will translate it into live action. But because series orders have become significantly smaller in modern Hollywood, they've always been relatively small when you go into UK. Like most UK series generally run for 6 to 8 episodes, whereas a traditional season of Western TV used to run 12 for like a half season replacement, or for a full season was somewhere between 20 and 24. And children's TV, like the first season of Power Rangers was something like 50, I think it was like 52 episodes, because they would put out a new episode 4 or 5 days a week. Um, so, anytime you were trying to adapt something older to something newer, there was always this issue of, well, you have to cut things out because a season just isn't as long. And then combine that with the fact that older TV shows that were made for TV generally were about, if I remember correctly, it used to be 23 minutes. 23 minutes was the runtime, which left about 7 minutes for commercials. Nowadays, it pushes it down. If I remember correctly, it's down to either 21 or 19 minutes for a 30-minute TV show because they put more ads in it. It's one of the reasons why, like, title sequences have gone out of fashion, where you don't have these big, long, impressive title sequences anymore for the most part. And you really only see them on streaming shows because streaming shows don't have to put commercials in. When you're trying to adapt something old to modern standards, they have to chop up stuff, and that can create some pacing issues because you have to tell the same story in a shorter amount of time. However, that's not what happened with Netflix's Avatar. The original Avatar: The Last Airbender did have close to double the amount of episodes for season 1, whereas the Netflix version had, like I said, about half. However, the Netflix version were hour-long episodes versus the 30-minute long episodes for Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the Netflix ones were actually an hour long, or pretty darn close to it, whereas Netflix stuff was generally only, like I said, about 23 minutes a piece. So I actually did the math, and the Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action show from Netflix actually has about a 20-minute longer runtime than the original animated series. However, the Netflix live-action version cuts out massive portions of season 1. There was an entire subplot where Aang goes and rescues an Earth Nation village that's been living under oppression from the Fire Nation. Like there's tons of stuff that just didn't make it in. And again, for the M. Night Shyamalan version, everyone was just kind of expecting that they were going to cut out massive chunks of it because you were going from an entire season to about an hour and a half to 2 hour movie. But they had more time in the Netflix version than they had in the cartoon version. And yet, they not only did they still cut out massive portions of the content, but they also smushed together a bunch of episodes. So theoretically, they should have been able to tell a bunch of stories that hadn't existed before, because they should have all this extra time, but they didn't. There was nothing new, quote unquote, in the live action version. They changed some plot points around so that it would make more sense. Like they blended, I think, 3 different episodes into one, where or it might have been 4, because there was one episode with Jet and the Freedom Fighters gets merged together with the episode where Aang actually goes to the northern is either the northern or southern air temple, and they meet the kind of tech dude there. Then the live action version was played by Danny Pundy, I think that's his name. He played Abad in Community. He's a great actor. And so they shoved those episodes into an episode about them going to getting into, I think it was Omashu, Yeah, because there was so they blended it together with there's two episodes in that happened in Omashu dealing with the King of Omashu and Bumi. There was the episodes with Jet's freedom fighters, and there was the Northern Air Temple episode. All four of these episodes were shoved together into one, and they still had to have these scenes where there's everyone is talking very very fast, and they're just lore dumping as much as they possibly can, and then and again they still didn't get to everything. Like Aang never met with the rest of the freedom fighters, if I remember correctly, or at least he didn't have the interactions that he did in the show. And so it wasn't that they didn't have enough time to do it. It's just their pacing is really, really bad. And they will extend out these scenes that are effectively Oscar bait scenes. And if you've never heard that term, Oscar bait is a movie or a TV show or just even a single scene that is meant to be something that you can submit to the Oscars and you hope that they're going to like it, because the Oscars in and of themselves, newsflash, the Oscars actually don't acknowledge greatness in acting and the entertainment industry. That's not their purpose. It's never. It might have been their purpose very, very early on, but since at least like the 70s or 80s, purpose of the Oscars is to show off a very, 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 very limited scope of what they define as quote unquote good acting. And so an Oscar bait scene is generally going to be very emotional. Something bad will have happened previously or will happen in there, and most of the time it involves somebody crying. Because a lot of people think that crying on command is an extremely difficult thing to do. Which it technically isn't. There's lots of people that know how to cry on command. Getting yourself to produce actual real tears, that's more difficult. But I've known quite a few people. I knew there was a woman that I didn't hire her, but she was hired at the store that I was managing at the time, and she had this issue with taking her break. She was a cashier. I think she was allowed 2 breaks and a lunch. No, she was only allowed 1 break because she didn't work long enough to get a lunch. Or no, she got a break and a lunch. Never mind. Anyway, she would just decide to go off on break without telling anyone. And in the store that I worked at, we generally only had 1 cashier at a time unless it was really busy, and she didn't work those shifts. And so what would generally happen is she would just walk away from the front of the store and go take her break in the break room without telling anybody. And that creates massive problems. The way that it was supposed to work is the manager on duty would kind of gauge what was going on and would assign out breaks when they had coverage for it. In the instance that your manager on duty was not paying attention to breaks, which did happen, then what you would do is we all had a headset on. You had your microphone clipped right here. You just go, hey, can I go on break? And the manager on duty would go, yeah, let me get someone to cover your shift or cover your break. Or they would go, we can't have you going on break right now. We're too busy. Let's wait for an hour or something like that. That's how it's supposed to work. This particular woman, she did not like that in any way, shape, or form. She hated that. And so she would just walk away. And after she'd done it like 2 or 3 times to me, I kind of sat her down and I said, hey, you can't do this. All right? I get that, you want your break. You're allowed your break. That's perfectly fine. However, I still have to run the store. And the store still has to function. In order for that to happen, I have to have somebody watching the registers. Because if a customer comes up to the register and there's nobody there, that creates really, really big problems. If my boss comes in and sees that there's nobody at the register, I'm getting written up or fired just out. That's just what's happening. There is no excuse for me at that point. So I can't have you walking away. And she goes, okay. And sure enough, the next time we worked together, she goes, okay, I'm going on break. And I go, hey, can you wait up for just a moment? I'm in the middle of a sale right now. I'll be able to cover it in about 10 minutes. I get no reply. What she had done is she went, I'm going on break, and took her headset off and walked away. So I had to sit her down again. I said, listen, this is not a power trip or anything like that. This is how the store works. You don't get to just go on break whenever you want. You have to have the manager on duty agree that you can go on break. If everyone could just walk off whenever they would want, then we wouldn't be able to staff the store. This is how it works. This is how it was explained to you when you were trained. I know because I trained you. I can't have you. I need you to ask to go on break if I haven't assigned you one. And then you need to wait for me to respond. I can't have you walking off. So sure enough, working together, and she does it again. And I'm finally fed up. I go and make a write-up. And when I'm giving it to her, she goes instantly from, hi, what's going on? I said, hey, we need to have a conversation in the office real quick. She's, okay. We go into the office and go, this is not a written warning. This specifically is just a documentation that we're having this conversation. This is not a negative aspect. This is not like a mark against you. This is just simply something that's going to go in your file that said that if this continues to be a problem, I can point to documentation and go, hey, on this date, we had this conversation, okay? So I'm not writing you up right now, but this is a problem. And she immediately went from, I don't understand why this is so hard. Why can't I just eat what I want? I said, because we all work for a company that's open to the public. And sometimes people need to shop when you want to eat. That's how working in retail works. I don't know what to say. This is how it's always been. But I am legally you're legally obligated to give me. No, we're not. In the state of Wisconsin, there is no mandatory break or lunch period. We literally do not have to offer you anything. Now, it is written into our employee handbook, so we do offer it because we're a national company and there are some states that do have that. But if you try to sue us for not giving you your lunch break at the same time, you're going to fail and you're going to waste a bunch of money because it's just not a law in Wisconsin. But that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying is I need you to be part of a team, not this solo person that just decides to work when they want to. And she immediately just turned on the waterworks. She was bawling her eyes out. So I personally think that she was a psychopath. Because there was a lot of things wrong. She became a teacher, which terrifies me. And she quit like a month after that because she got her own classroom. Which again, terrifies the hell out of me. I weep for her students. But, so the idea of like crying and stuff like that, it's not a difficult thing for most skilled actors. We can get very emotional very quickly. But that's what they would do, is they would extend these little bit of emotions to scenes in a hopes of giving the actors the ability to really emote with these strong emotions. Because that's what the Oscars like. And that's what award shows like. The Golden Globes, the Oscars, all of them, they like really, really strong emotions. And the two strongest emotions there are for most people are love, or the three, are love, sadness, and hate. And love makes for a weird scene. However, sadness and hate, or sadness and anger, I guess, are really, really easy to identify, and they're two of the emotions that most actors learn how to emote relatively well. And so, instead of pacing things fairly adequately in Netflix, you have these scenes where they just rush everything together so that they can spend 20 minutes on a scene that lasted 5 minutes in the show. And they do that over and over and over and over again to the point where at the end of season 1, they've gotten to the same place, roughly, but they've gotten there in such a convoluted way that they have skipped like 7 or 8 full episodes, and they smush together a bunch of other ones. And it just turns into just a not fun thing. let's move over to X-Men number 97. The first two episodes of X-Men 97, which both premiered on the same date a couple weeks ago, are actually pretty good, and they made me excited for it. The pacing isn't bad. It's effectively a two-part episode, though it's not listed that way, because the plot really kind of carries forward in a continuous fashion. The end of the first episode, which is called "To Me, My X-Men," bumps right up against the start of the second episode, which is Mutant Liberation Begins. And so those two episodes are put together really, really well. However, they are drawing from comic books, which is real. I think that's what the original X-Men 90 series did. And one of the things that people loved about the 90s X-Men is how faithful they were in their adaptations. They did Days of Future Past, and they did it really well because despite the fact that they only had 30 minutes, they were able to condense an entire comic scene into multi-part stories. And that was one of the things that X-Men, the original X-Men 90s cartoon, did often, is you would have these part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, like the Phoenix Saga in and of itself was a 5-part series, and then there was also the Dark Phoenix Saga, which is another 3-part series. So like half or a quarter or a half of a season was one comic storyline. And the first two episodes of X-Men 97 are adapting a couple different comic storylines. They're setting up a storyline called Life Death, which was a very storm-heavy, very storm-focused storyline, where Storm loses her powers due to a device that was used against her, which is basically what happens in the show. And the Life Death storyline involves her meeting up with Forge, who's another really, really great X-Men character that just really hasn't shown up in the media, in the like the movies or in X-Men, the original 90s series. Forge only showed up for a couple episodes, but he's a really, really amazing character. And so they were setting up Life Death. So that's perfectly fine. And then the other things they were doing, they were harkening back a little bit to one of like a dozen different Sentinel-based storylines, and the storyline where after Professor X's death at the end of X-Men, the 90s, the final episode, Xavier dies. X-Men 97 starts a year later. On the comics, that happened too, and Magneto takes over Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, and also takes over heading the X-Men. And so those storylines in them themselves, like Life Death in and of itself is like it's either a 6 or 8 issue limited series. And it is amazingly well done. It's been praised for a long time. It was a great series. So they're probably adapting like the first half of the first comic of Life Death in there. And then they're also adapting like 3 or 4 different comics into one. And the first episode was paced fine. The second episode, they also start dealing with the Madeline Pryor stuff from the comics. If you're unaware, when Jean was taken in the comics, I can't speak for the X-Men 97 because they haven't explained this part yet. But in the comics, when the Phoenix Force took over Jean and she became Phoenix, Phoenix was a little bit worried about what it was doing to Jean, and so eventually it created like a second version of Jean and left another one just kind of underground in or underwater actually in a little cocoon. And I can't remember if this is the same thing, but in addition to that happening, Mr. Sinister created a clone of Jean Grey. That if I remember correctly in the comics, I'm again, I'm going off of memory here, and everybody knows my memory ain't great. If I remember correctly, after the Phoenix Saga, Jean died. But then she came back, or she was resurrected or someone. The one that came back was actually Madeline Pryor, not Jean Grey. So the second episode is a combination of them dealing with the Madeline Pryor saga, because eventually it comes out that the Jean that they know isn't the original Jean, and the original Jean shows up again. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens there that happens over multiple comics, and eventually the original Jean stays, and the clone Jean leaves and calls herself Madeline Pryor. That's basically the B plot for episode 2. However, they never touched on Madeline Pryor in the original series, so in addition to having to deal with the results of everything, they basically had to explain where she came from, and so Mr. Sinister shows up, and there's all this other stuff. And I remember one scene in particular. This might have been... No. This is episode 3. Episode 2, never mind. Anyway, so episode 1 and 2 were fine. Episode 3 is where the pacing starts coming up. And yeah, so that's when they deal with the Madeline Pryor stuff. And I remember one scene in particular where Jean doesn't stop talking for like a full 5 or 7 minutes, where it is just her constantly because she has to dump so much lore into the scene, because then they have to again spread out other scenes so that you can get the emotions in there. And it just turns out really, really bad, because you get this massive lore dump, and then you have entire scenes where nothing happens. And then we go to the most recent episode, which is Motendo / Life Death Part 1. So it is effectively 2 episodes merged into one, which again is a bad idea. And the first one is actually a trope that I really, really like. Jubilee and Sunspot get transported into a video game. I like stuff like that. I think it's really, really fun. I'm a dork like that. And basically what they have to do is Mojo from Mojo World and Battle World, a recurring villain for the X-Men, has trapped them in a video game and is broadcasting it because Mojo receives sustenance from ratings. Mojo was always kind of a commentary on the focus of sales and capitalism in general, in the entertainment industry in particular. It's really good satire, to be perfectly honest. And the video game is based on episodes that Jubilee has lived through. And so it very easily could have turned into a clip show, which is, if you're not familiar with the term, it's basically where they create an entire episode that doesn't really have a lot or sometimes any new footage created. They just cut together previous footage and find some sort of framing device to do that. So it very easily could have turned into that, but it didn't. What happened is when they get transported into the game, you see like a 3 or 4 minute montage of someone went and created really, really great kind of Super NES era pixel graphics for Jubilee, the X-Men 97 version of Sunspot, and Sentinels and Magneto and a couple other things. It was really, really well done. But you literally just watch this little montage of a little television with these sprite versions of them basically playing a beat 'em up. And it's horrible. And then at the very, very end, because again, this is half an episode. The other half is dealing with Life Death, which again is a really, really heavy subject and comic line. So at the end, Jubilee doesn't want to leave the video game world. Now, she has only existed in the video game world, as far as we can tell, for less than 10 minutes. But now she loves this. She loves, living the past and knowing how the future is going to go. And, slight spoiler alert, a character that already exists in there that's kind of hacking the system, that will remain nameless, has to convince her, no, you need to go to the real world. And it's supposed to be this very emotional scene, and it's just not. Jubilee, the kind of subplot there, the igniting incident, I think is what it is. I can't think of anything right now. Is it's Jubilee's 18th birthday, and she wanted to go to the arcade to celebrate. And Magneto's like, no, you must train so that we will be better prepared to fight those who hate us. And she's like, but I want to have fun. It's like, what is more fun than surviving to your 19th birthday? And so she goes and she pouts in her room and talking with Sunspot, and then they get sucked into the video game. And so they try to justify this thing of, I don't want to leave the video game. Video games are fun. Well, you need to grow up now. But there's nothing in the 3 other episodes of the series that have existed thus far has dealt with Jubilee trying to hold on to her youth. Jubilee's character in general has always been about not being treated as a kid and not wanting to be viewed as young and wanting to do more adult things and be considered an adult member of the X-Men. And so in, again, a 3-minute montage that has no dialogue, and it's just, again, a sprite version of a beat-em-up that we watch. We don't even get to play it. We just get to watch it. And, by the way, it is really, really, the person that did the sprite work for it is just so good. And it made me really, really happy until I realized that, wow, that was the whole plot. And then we get this drawn-out scene that was longer than the montage, where Jubilee has to come to terms with the fact that she's getting older and that she needs to understand that she needs to put away the childish things and grow up, which could be a really interesting character arc for Jubilee. Again, the kind of juxtaposition of the character that has always wanted to be considered an adult and always wanted to be older, coming to the realization that being older comes with a lot of responsibilities, and a lot of sacrifices and the things like that. That is a relatively common plot in fiction in general. The idea of the young character wanting to grow up, and then when they grow up, realizing how much they miss their childhood. Great plot, can be done very, very well. Wasn't done very, very well here. Because again, we don't know what triggered this. Again, the episode before, she was all, no, I'm an adult. And then she gets told once, no, you can't have a birthday party at the arcade. You must go train in the danger room. And now, all I want to do is stay a kid for the rest of my life, and instantly becomes Peter Pan. Again, could have been a really, really interesting thing. And if they had spread it out over an entire episode, they might have been able to actually give us the justification for her kind of coming to this realization of, no, I do want to, I can't focus on becoming an adult and completely forget my childhood. I also can't live in my childhood. I'm an adult now. Like, that could have been something really, really good. But they didn't. They just spend 3 minutes showing us really great animated pixel art, and then this lore dump of, yes, I know, like the mystery character just sits there and tells her, I know you want to remain here because it's really fun to live in video games. Doesn't let Jubilee come to that decision herself, or come to that realization herself. Doesn't question Jubilee about, hey, what are you feeling? Hey, let's get out of here. And Jubilee has to go, but I don't want to. No, the mystical, magical Deus Ex Machina plot armor character shows up, tells Jubilee exactly how she feels, and then immediately convinces Jubilee that she doesn't feel that way anymore. It is horrendous, and it is typical of Hollywood writing right now. It's this idea of we will tell you what's going on instead of taking the time to actually show it to you, because we need to make sure that we leave enough time for the big emotional Oscar bait scenes. Because if we don't put our Oscar bait scenes in, then we won't get nominated for awards, and that's the only way we sell things now, is it has to be an award-winning something. Things that don't earn awards don't deserve to exist. And it just infuriates me. We see it over and over and over and over and over again. The idea of show don't tell has become a lost art in cinema in general. And we just see it over and over and over again. Picard season 2 was just a lot of, we're just going to make shit up and then tell you all of it instead of taking the time to show you. It happens in the new X-Men 97. It happened in Avatar. Cowboy Bebop was the exact same way. Tell, don't show. We are going to lore dump on you so we can get to the really important parts. And the really important parts, the problem with them is they're not well directed. They generally are not well acted. And part of that is the actors themselves not being given the scripts necessary to be able to act them well. And part of it is, like for Avatar The Last Airbender, the live action Netflix, the leads are really, really green actors. And it shows. None of them have ever headed a TV series before. Most of them had very, very limited acting experience, which is to be expected of child actors. You don't get a ton of experience as a child actor, because being a child actor, if anyone watched a certain documentary about Nickelodeon recently, being a child actor, remarkably enough, does not involve acting a whole lot. It involves a lot of bad shit. So it's not uncommon for child actors to be relatively inexperienced. It's one of the reasons why it's extremely important to have a really good director to be able to direct them and to be able to work with them to get the right emotions out of this scene. And then you have to have a really phenomenal writing team to be able to give them a script that they can really dig into, that they can really kind of lose themselves in the character. None of that happened. The writing was subpar for the most part. It wasn't horrible, but again, most of the hard work was done a decade ago by the people that wrote the original Avatar The Last Airbender. These people were basically just adapting it for a different medium, and they didn't do it great. And the director, it was obvious that the director was not giving good direction, because most of the acting performances were extremely flat. No one was really emoting very strongly. Like, everything was very subdued, aside from Firelord Ozai, which is played by Daniel Day Kim, who is a phenomenally talented actor and has decades of experience under his belt. And General Shao, who's played by another phenomenally talented actor that I can never remember his name. But he has, again, a litany of experience under his belt and probably didn't need any direction, which is why both of those characters did so well compared to everyone else just being these really, really flat, soulless characters with really bad writing. And the same thing is true, like in animation, it's even more important to have really good writing, because so much of the performance is the writing. The animation, yeah, you can animate some really, really amazing stuff, but if the voice acting is not there, and half of voice acting is the voice actor acting, the other half is the writing itself. And so you give a good voice actor, which they have brilliant voice actors working on this, you give them a subpar script, and then force them, due to time constraints, force them to take a really emotional scene and smush it into a 2 or 3 minute long scene when it should be, 5-10 minutes. that's when you start running into pacing issues, and that's when you start having subpar stuff. Again, when I watched the first 2 episodes of X-Men 97, there was a few things in there where I'm just like, obviously that scene was not written by the best the best staff on the writing team. But overall, it wasn't bad. And then episode 3 immediately turned me sour to it a bit with just the rushed tell, don't show aspect to get all of the lore and plot about Madeline Pryor into the scene as quickly as possible so they could spend the rest of the scene doing weird, strange, like hallucination stuff that I don't know where in the hell that came from, because that was never Mr. Sinister's power. At least not that I remember. And then again, and that's only the first half of the episode is Motendo. Second half, Life Death, again, really emotional, really, I believe it won a bunch of awards too. It was a great comic run. And they smushed together, I think like two or three comic books into like a 10-minute, maybe, not even, because the runtime's only 30 minutes. And Motendo lasts for about at least 20, maybe a little bit more. Maybe a little less. So yeah, they smashed 3 really, really lore-heavy comic books into effectively a 2 or 3 minute scene about riding horses, and then like a 7 minutes is a scene where you are supposed to see this bond forming between Storm and Forge, and then something happens that damages that bond, and you're supposed to feel really, really bad because you see this kind of budding romance start. You can see how much they both care about each other. That's what it is in the comics. And then this revelation happens, and it completely shatters all the trust. It shatters the relationship in and of itself. And it's really, really heartbreaking to Storm, because Storm has gone from a literal demigod that had belonged to the X-Men for decades at that point and considered them her family. And once her powers were gone, she felt that she no longer belonged to her family. She effectively felt like she had been disowned, which didn't happen. She left on her own accord, but it was because she felt that she didn't belong anymore. She felt that she'd lost the entirety of her family. She finds someone new to form a connection with, and then that person, there's a revelation that causes that relationship to be fractured instantly. And, it's supposed to be this incredible roller coaster ride for Storm that, in the comics, eventually leads to her kind of dealing with her own demons, and having to kind of deal with the emotions that led her to where she was, because she was never kicked out of the X-Men. She left because she felt that she didn't belong anymore. Kind of an extreme version of imposter syndrome. And she has to kind of come to terms with the idea that she had kind of built a massive portion of her identity into her powers. And once they were gone, she didn't know who she was anymore, and she had to kind of find herself. So that's the plot of the comic book. The plot of the TV show thus far is Rogue loses her powers. Rogue meets a cool-looking dude with a bionic arm. Rogue falls madly in love with him because horses. And then something happens, and Rogue hates the fuck out of him. And that's the entire plot. And again, this is only part 1, so there's a good chance part 2 is going to butcher the rest of the story by giving you huge lore dumps and then spending 10 minutes on a scene that doesn't need to be 10 minutes. It's annoying the hell out of me, because again, there are shows that have brilliant pacing. Like I was recently rewatching Heroes. Heroes was a phenomenon when it came out. And the first season is brilliant, because you start off Heroes with these people kind of awakening to the fact that they have powers, that they're superheroes effectively. And nobody understands what's going on. Like, most of the main characters don't know where they're coming from. Some of them are outright just denying that they exist because they don't want to have to deal with it. And then there is one main character who belongs to a group called the Company that actually knows everything. But you don't get told any of that in the first season. There is this slow drip feed of here's a new bit of information. And here's another bit of information. And now we learn about this and this. And the pacing is absolutely wonderful because you slowly start learning where the powers are coming from and what's going on. And there's this one of the characters is clairvoyance and has precognitive powers. They can see the future. And they paint what they see. So they paint pictures of the future. And so in the first episode, you find out that New York City is going, there's going to be effectively a nuclear explosion there. And so they have to try and stop that. And the tagline is, save the cheerleader, save the world. And throughout the entire first season, you're trying to figure out, okay, well, where does this come from? And they introduce a character who has powers that could cause it. And so, oh, that's the person that's going to explode New York. We have to stop them. And then that character dies. But the future hasn't changed. Okay, well, there's a couple different characters that have the ability to like steal or mimic other people's powers. And they keep kind of flip-flopping between which one of them is going to be the one that explodes and destroys New York. And there's another plot where there's a group of people that want it to happen because they're going to exploit the tragedy to put somebody in the White House. And then the heroes are trying to stop it because they don't want millions of people to die. And it's a really phenomenal thing. And then season 2 comes, and they start retconning. And season 2 is not horrible. It's just not great. Compared to the first season, it's... And then season 3 happens, and they take characters that were established and completely, without any justification, change their motivation entirely. The villain Sylar goes from a psychopathic killer to someone who has extreme mommy problems to someone who's just trying to be a good person to sociopathic killer and everything in between. They have another character played by Kristen Bell who's brilliant. I believe you first see her in season 1 or maybe in season 2. And it's explained there that her parents, her father... is one of the founding members of the company or one of the high-ups in the company. And when her power showed up, she has the ability to create electricity. When she was like 6, they did massive amounts of experiments on her and basically trapped her in an underground bunker and never let her leave. So she grew up entirely in this containment facility. It's a big containment facility, and she wasn't a prisoner there. Like, she got to walk around and everything, but she was never allowed to leave. And so she developed these sadistic tendencies. She enjoyed inflicting pain on people, and she would do it with her electricity. And that becomes kind of a subplot between her and Peter. And then season 3 comes around, and now not only is she allowed to leave, but she's been doing it for years. She was actually trained and has been an agent for forever. And we just completely forget about the fact that she said that she's never left and she's never went to prom and she never went to school and all this stuff. And now she's perfectly fine. And yeah, they just keep, like, she becomes a good guy at point, and then she's a bad guy again, and she's not a sadist anymore, and then she is a sadist, and it is the weirdest thing I have ever seen. By the way, if anyone's unfamiliar with the term sadist is just someone that enjoys inflicting pain on someone else, I believe. Because masochism is you enjoy inflicting pain on yourself. Sadism is you enjoy inflicting pain on other people. And before anyone gets all up in arms about like the like Bondism, and because BDSM and stuff like that, sadomasochism and stuff like that, it's part of that subculture, and there are a lot of people that show sadistic tendencies that aren't sociopaths. You know, they enjoy being in control, and they enjoy kind of inflicting pain on people, but not to punish them or anything like that. And they do it in, you know, I can't think of the word right now. Everyone is okay with it. Like, some people enjoy feeling pain and some people enjoy inflicting pain. As long as it's consensual. Consent, that's what I was looking for. As long as it's consensual, let people do what they want. And as long as no one's getting actual, like, permanently hurt, let people do what they want. Kristen Bell's character was not like that. She actually enjoyed inflicting pain on other people without their consent. That's the bad person. But then she wasn't a bad person, then she was. And so, like, Heroes is a really great example of just writing going really, really poorly, really quickly. But even then, they didn't have the pacing issues that we have nowadays, where just people can't understand how to pace a series out. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that series are getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, but they want to tell the same stories in just a shorter amount of time, and it just doesn't work. So yeah, that's my little rant about that. Like I said, again, at one point I wanted to be an actor. And so this is all stuff that I studied in college and after college. Like, all of this stuff was really, really important to being an actor, especially since one of the things that I was taught in college is if you want to follow the kind of traditional Hollywood track, congratulations, you're probably going to fail. Statistically, becoming a successful actor in Hollywood is not common in any way, shape, or form. There are tons of actors. Really good example. Screen Actors Guild has something like, I don't know, I think it's like a few hundred. Let's look. Screen Actors Guild members count. 160,000. So yeah. Screen Actors Guild has roughly around 160,000 members. The vast majority of them do not make enough money as actors to qualify for the medical benefits that SAG-AFTRA provides. In order to qualify for that, you have to make somewhere in the neighborhood of $24,000 and change. That is just over the poverty level, depending on where you live, or it might be just under the poverty level. And it's something like 80% of SAG-AFTRA members do not get benefits because they don't make enough money to qualify for them. 80%. And again, that's 160,000 people. If you think that there are only 160,000 actors just in the U.S., which again, Screen Actors Guild, you have actors from all over the world. If you want to work in Hollywood, you have to be a member of SAG-AFTRA. So if you think there are only 160,000 qualified actors worldwide on a planet of 7 billion people, you are nuts. And the vast majority of them, again, upwards of 80%, do not make enough money to even get healthcare benefits. They do not make above the poverty line, so they have to be working another job. So what my acting teacher told me, and again, this is over a decade ago, you want to be an actor, that's perfectly fine. If you want to go the Hollywood route, that's perfectly fine. You are in for an uphill battle. It's going to be a pain in the ass, and you are going to work dead-end jobs and wait tables for a long time. And then maybe, if you're really lucky, you'll get a chance to be what's called a working actor, which is someone that you see them in everything, but they never, they never get top billing or anything like that. They're never a lead character, but they'll just show up in like guest star roles and stuff like that constantly. They play minor roles and stuff. That's what's called a working actor. And you'll do some commercial work and other stuff like that. It's called a working actor. Or you can learn how to write and create your own stuff. And even back then, like I went to college, 2006 was when I started college. So even then, this was before YouTube had really launched. This was technically before Facebook really got as big as it was. Facebook, I think at that point, was still limited mostly to colleges, because it started off, Harvard, I think, is where Facebook started, and it just started as a kind of an intranet for Harvard students. Even back then, he said, you want to know the people that are really doing good stuff are the people that are going out and writing their own stuff and doing independent films and stuff like that. Like, you're going to have a much better chance at being an actor if you're willing to do independent films and create your own stuff and, Really, really, if you want to be a Hollywood movie star, it's perfectly fine. You're probably not going to make it. However, if you're willing to do a lot of independent films and TV shows, guest spots into the TV shows, commercial work, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to do some amazing, really fun, transformative acting, and not just hoping that the CGI building behind you explodes. And this was it again. This is like 2006, 2007. Nowadays, it's even easier for actors to be able to create their own stuff, and SAG-AFTRA is doing absolutely everything that they can to hold on to the stranglehold that they've held since the entertainment industry was effectively born, for the most part. It used to be studios that held everything, and then SAG-AFTRA came in, and now they hold all the stuff, along with the Writers Guild, stuff like that. They do everything they can to hold on to that little stranglehold that they have. And yeah, thanks to YouTube, thanks to independent streaming services, thanks to the explosion in or the extreme reduction in the cost of quality filming supplies, you no longer have to have a major motion picture studio to create really good stuff. Like Kickstarter can allow you to get the funding that you need to create your independent film. And SAG-AFTRA hates that. So anyway, this whole thing was supposed to be about pacing. And as you guys know, I am not particularly great at pacing either. So this is where I'm going to let you all go. Hope you all enjoyed this. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.